Tonight we begin with a military operation that Western defense officials had anticipated, Russian naval commanders had dismissed, and Ukrainian engineers had spent months secretly preparing. An attack that unfolded not over days of visible preparation, not over hours of detectable movement, but in 45 terrifying minutes. 45 minutes that left a major Russian naval installation in ruins. 45 minutes that sent multiple Russian warships to the bottom of the Black Sea. 45 minutes that produced images now circulating around the world, images of flames stretching across the water, of ammunition cooking off in massive secondary explosions, of a naval base that Russia considered impregnable, now reduced to burning wreckage. What Ukraine did tonight crossed a line that Vladimir Putin had publicly declared would never be crossed. And when that line shattered, when those drones, when dozens upon dozens of them, descended on Russia's Black Sea Fleet headquarters, Moscow did not have time to hesitate. They didn't have time to respond. They barely had time to react. By the time Russian air defenses understood what was happening, it was already over. Ukraine had executed what military analysts are already calling the most successful drone attack in the history of modern naval warfare. And tonight, the Black Sea is burning. For several months now, there had been whispers, not from official Ukrainian military briefings, not from government press releases, just whispers that Ukraine was preparing something unprecedented for the Black Sea. Ukraine has been innovative, yes, but they have been patient in their innovation. Their naval drone program has followed a certain evolution, a progression, almost a curriculum of escalating capability. First came the experimental attacks, single drones testing Russian defenses, probing for weaknesses. Then came the coordinated strikes, small groups of drones working together to overwhelm point defenses. Then came the successful hits on individual ships. The Moskva patrol boats, landing craft picked off one by one. But what set off alarm bells in Western intelligence circles this week was that the progression went silent. Naval analysts who monitor Ukrainian drone production know the indicators: the sudden increase in component shipments to coastal facilities, the unusual activity at testing sites along the Dnipro River, the disappearance of key Ukrainian naval engineers from their usual locations, the sudden quiet in communications channels that had been buzzing with coordination. All of that went dark 10 days ago. And whenever Ukraine's drone program goes dark, it means something massive is being prepared. Intelligence officials in Washington, London, and Warsaw noticed the silence. They flagged it in their reports. They warned their counterparts that something was coming. But even they didn't anticipate the scale of what Ukraine was about to unleash. Early this morning, Black Sea time, NATO surveillance assets detected what they described as an unprecedented concentration of surface contacts moving toward Russian-controlled waters, including drone signatures and quantities that had not been observed in this conflict or any conflict ever before. Initial counts suggested 30 to 40 drones. Within minutes, that estimate was revised upward. 50 drones, then 60. Then analysts stopped counting individual units and started describing them as a swarm. These are the kinds of formations that Ukraine only deploys when they are attempting something historic. A knockout blow against Russian naval power in the Black Sea, a demonstration of capability that would reshape the strategic balance, or a message to Moscow that no Russian asset anywhere is safe. Western observers watching the drone signatures converge didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three simultaneously. But what they did know was that Ukraine was changing the rules of naval warfare in real time. And when a nation at war deploys an entirely new type of weapon system at unprecedented scale, without warning, without precedent, every military planner in the world pays attention. The target became clear within minutes. The swarm was converging on Sevastopol, not the outer harbor, not the patrol areas, not the peripheral facilities, the main naval base, the headquarters of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, the crown jewel of Russian naval power in the region. Ukraine was going for the kill. The response from NATO officials monitoring the attack in real time was not routine, it was not measured, it was not diplomatic, it was awe. Defense analysts, after emergency briefings, described Ukraine's operation as audacious, attacking the most heavily defended naval facility in the Black Sea, sophisticated and coordinating dozens of autonomous drones in a synchronized strike, and perhaps most importantly, revolutionary, on demonstrating a new form of warfare that navies around the world will be studying for decades. But sophisticated planning only works if the execution matches. Tonight, Ukraine's execution was flawless. In fact, their attack today was among the most precisely coordinated military operations we've seen in the 21st century. Here's what we know. Within the first 5 minutes of the attack, Ukrainian drones breached Russian outer defensive perimeters. These weren't the improvised explosive boats Ukraine had used in earlier attacks. These were next-generation naval drones, autonomous systems equipped with advanced navigation, electronic warfare countermeasures, and warheads specifically designed to penetrate ship hulls below the waterline. Ukraine had been developing these systems in secret for over a year. Tonight, the world saw what they can do. Tonight, Ukrainian military officials confirmed that their naval drone units launched a massive coordinated assault on Russia's Sevastopol naval base, including strikes on warships, fuel storage facilities, and the dry dock infrastructure that Russia depends on to maintain its Black Sea fleet. Ukraine struck before Russian defenses could organize an effective response. They hit a Kilo-class submarine that was preparing for deployment. They hit a frigate that had been launching cruise missiles at Ukrainian cities for months. They hit fuel storage tanks that erupted in explosions visible from 20 miles away. They hit the dry dock facilities where Russia repairs damaged vessels. They hit ammunition storage bunkers that produced secondary explosions for hours after the initial attack. In other words, Ukraine didn't just attack Russian ships. They attacked Russia's ability to operate ships, the maintenance facilities, the fuel supplies, the ammunition reserves, the repair infrastructure, the entire support system that keeps the Black Sea Fleet functional. This is what made the attack so devastating. Russia can replace a ship eventually with great difficulty at enormous cost, but the infrastructure to maintain a fleet, that takes years to rebuild. And tonight, much of that infrastructure is on fire. Ukraine's planners understood that destroying ships is tactical. Destroying the ability to maintain ships is strategic. And they chose strategic. They didn't waste drones on patrol boats. They didn't scatter their forces across multiple minor targets. They concentrated everything on the facilities that matter most. And the results speak for themselves. And here's where the story becomes even more remarkable. They overwhelmed them so completely, so systematically, that even Russian military bloggers, normally quick to spin any setback as a minor inconvenience, are struggling to explain what happened. You don't get Russia's military establishment to admit vulnerability easily, but tonight, the videos coming out of Sevastopol make denial impossible. The flames are too big, the explosions are too numerous, the damage is too obvious. Defense analysts speaking with Western media under anonymity described Russia's defensive failure as systemic. Not a single point of failure, but a fundamental mismatch between Russian defensive doctrine and Ukraine's offensive innovation. Ukraine proved tonight that they understand modern naval warfare better than the Russian admirals who have commanded the Black Sea Fleet for decades. Their drones were not only effective, they were targeted so precisely that they struck command and control facilities, repair infrastructure, and ammunition storage in a sequence designed to maximize chaos and minimize Russia's ability to respond. That level of precision matters because it shows Ukraine isn't just attacking randomly. They're not simply launching drones and hoping for the best. They are conducting systematic campaigns to dismantle Russian military capability, one operation at a time. As reports continued coming in throughout the night, we learned more about the scale of Ukraine's operation. Ukrainian naval drone units carried out the primary assault on Sevastopol harbor, striking at least 6 major vessels and causing damage to several more. Ukrainian aerial drones operating simultaneously targeted Russian air defense installations around the base, degrading Russia's ability to respond to the naval attack. Ukrainian cyber units reportedly disrupted Russian naval communications during the critical first 15 minutes, creating confusion and preventing coordinated defensive action. Ukrainian Special Operations Forces may have provided real-time targeting intelligence from positions near the base, though this remains unconfirmed. This wasn't just a drone attack. This wasn't just a naval raid. This was a multi-domain operation coordinated across sea, air, cyber, and potentially ground assets. This was a demonstration of combined arms warfare at a level Ukraine has never before displayed. And combined arms coordination is the one thing Russia's military has failed to achieve consistently since this war began. For every every advance Russia has made, every city they've besieged, every village they've captured, Ukraine has countered with something that degrades Russian capability faster than Russia can replace it. Tonight's attack on the Black Sea Fleet is the most dramatic example yet. Russia has been losing ships steadily throughout this war. But losing ships while your maintenance facilities burn, that's a different category of problem. That's a problem that can't be solved with reinforcements or mobilization. That's a problem that takes years and billions of dollars to fix. Remember, Russia thought the Black Sea was their lake. They thought their navy would dominate Ukrainian waters indefinitely. They thought Ukraine, a nation without a significant surface fleet, posed no naval threat worth considering. They thought their coastal defenses, their warships, their submarines would project power across the entire region without serious opposition. They thought wrong. Tonight, the exact opposite of Russia's assumptions is playing out on screens around the world. Ukraine, using weapons that cost a fraction of a single Russian warship, has crippled Russia's Black Sea Fleet. Ukraine, operating without any surface navy to speak of, has achieved naval superiority through innovation alone. Ukraine, dismissed by Russian admirals as a landlocked adversary unworthy of respect, has sunk more Russian naval vessels than any opponent since World War II. The images from Sevastopol tonight will be studied at naval academies for generations, not because of what Russia did, because of what Ukraine did to Russia. This is what asymmetric warfare looks like when executed by a nation with nothing to lose and everything to prove. What makes this moment so devastating for Moscow and so consequential for the war is that the destruction of the Black Sea Fleet's infrastructure happened at a time when Vladimir Putin is under mounting pressure to show results. Russian hardliners want visible victories, not explanations about why Sevastopol is burning. Russian military commanders want reinforcements, not requests to explain how drones breached their defenses. Russian state media needs propaganda victories, not footage of their flagship naval base in flames. Russian oligarchs want stability, not a war that keeps escalating in unexpected directions. Putin is balancing these demands while managing a war that has already cost Russia more than anyone in Moscow anticipated. And when leaders in that position suffer sudden, visible, undeniable defeats, they don't respond rationally. They respond from pressure, they respond from embarrassment, they respond from the need to show strength when strength has just been publicly humiliated. Tonight, the headquarters of Russia's Black Sea Fleet is burning, and somewhere in the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin is deciding how to respond to a defeat he cannot spin, cannot hide, and cannot ignore. That response, whatever form it takes, will shape the next phase of this conflict. The statement released by the Pentagon tonight, now circulated to all NATO member states, was designed to signal that Western allies fully support Ukraine's right to strike legitimate military targets, including targets inside Russian-controlled Crimea. Defense officials said plainly that Russia's Black Sea Fleet has been used to launch attacks on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure for over 2 years. They said the ships destroyed tonight were not peaceful vessels. They were weapons platforms that had killed Ukrainian civilians. That is diplomatic language for Russia doesn't get to cry about military losses when they've been using that military to commit atrocities. You don't usually hear that level of directness from the Pentagon unless they want Moscow to understand something clearly. Ukraine's attacks on the Black Sea Fleet are legitimate. They are legal under international law, and they will continue. The Biden administration has been careful throughout this war to avoid language that could be seen as encouraging escalation. Tonight, they dropped that caution. Tonight, they endorsed Ukraine's operation without qualification, and that endorsement sends a message to Moscow that attacking the Black Sea Fleet is not a red line for the West. It's a legitimate military objective that Ukraine has every right to pursue. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed his nation in a brief, powerful statement released shortly after midnight Kyiv time. He said, "Tonight, the Black Sea Fleet learned that there is no harbor safe enough, no defense strong enough, no position secure enough to protect those who wage war against Ukraine." He said, "Every missile they have launched at our homes, every drone they have sent against our cities, every shell they have fired at our people, tonight we collected payment for all of it." And he said, "To the Russian sailors who survived tonight, go home, leave Crimea, leave our waters, because if you stay, more nights like this are coming." These are not diplomatic statements. These are not carefully hedged political messages. These are declarations of intent from a commander-in-chief who understands that tonight's victory was not just military, it was psychological. Ukraine just proved that Russia's most powerful naval assets can be destroyed by weapons that cost less than a used car. That realization will echo through Russian military planning for years to come. Here's what makes the situation even more significant for the broader war. Tonight's attack on Sevastopol wasn't isolated. Along with the drone swarm assault on the naval base, Ukrainian forces launched coordinated strikes on the Kerch Bridge, the critical supply line connecting Russia to Crimea, causing traffic to halt for several hours. Ukrainian long-range drones hit fuel storage facilities at 2 additional locations in Crimea, compounding the logistics damage. Ukrainian partisans reportedly disrupted Russian railway operations on the peninsula, slowing any potential reinforcement. Ukrainian cyber units targeted Russian military communications across the entire Black Sea region, creating chaos in command and control. All of this happened within the same 6-hour window. When Ukraine moves multiple pieces at once, it means something larger is underway. It means they're not conducting isolated raids. They're conducting a systematic campaign to make Crimea ungovernable, unsupplyable, and ultimately untenable for Russian forces. Tonight was the most visible piece of that campaign. But it wasn't the only piece. And the pieces are adding up. Military analysts are now considering several possibilities for what comes next. One is that Russia will attempt to relocate what remains of the Black Sea Fleet to safer ports, effectively ceding control of the western Black Sea to Ukraine. Another is that Russia will attempt to reinforce Crimea's air defenses, diverting resources from the front lines and weakening their ground offensive. A third possibility, the one worrying Russian commanders the most, is that Ukraine will press their advantage with additional attacks before Russia can recover. But today, Ukraine demonstrated that they're not waiting for Russia to choose. They didn't allow Moscow to set the pace. They didn't give Russia time to reinforce. They didn't wait for perfect conditions. They struck when they were ready, and they struck with everything they had. That initiative, that willingness to attack at a time and place of their choosing, is what separates Ukraine's military from the defensive posture they were forced into during the first months of the war. They're not defending anymore. They're hunting. What we're watching now is a test of adaptation. Russia wants to believe their naval power can survive Ukraine's drone revolution. Ukraine wants to prove that no amount of Russian armor, Russian displacement, or Russian naval tradition can stop 50 drones armed with explosives and guided by satellite navigation. NATO wants to see whether this model of asymmetric warfare can be replicated against other potential adversaries. And defense contractors around the world want to understand whether tonight marks the end of the traditional surface warship as we know it. The Black Sea has become a laboratory for 21st century naval warfare, and tonight, Ukraine ran an experiment that produced results no one can ignore. Ships that cost hundreds of millions of dollars, destroyed by drones that cost tens of thousands, decades of naval doctrine, overturned in 45 minutes. The lessons from tonight will reshape how navies operate for generations. Tonight, we've heard from NATO officials who are now monitoring Russian fleet movements across the Black Sea. They say surviving Russian vessels are retreating toward Novorossiysk on the Russian mainland, abandoning forward positions they've held since the war began. They say Russian naval aviation is conducting emergency patrols, searching for additional Ukrainian drone swarms that may be approaching. And they say Russia's decision to concentrate so many valuable assets in Sevastopol, despite repeated Ukrainian demonstrations of long-range strike capability, represents one of the most significant strategic blunders of the entire war. But Ukraine is not celebrating prematurely. In fact, Ukraine is preparing for retaliation. Their response today, bold, devastating, and impossible to downplay, sent a message to Moscow that the Black Sea belongs to whoever can hold it. And tonight, Russia cannot hold it. It sent a message to NATO that Ukraine can conduct sophisticated military operations that rival anything Western forces could execute. And it sent a message to the world that the age of the drone swarm has arrived. As the night goes on and the fires in Sevastopol continue burning, we expect more details to emerge about exactly how many Russian vessels were destroyed, how much infrastructure was damaged, and how Russia plans to respond. But what we do know is that Ukraine's timing was perfect. It caught Russia unprepared. It demonstrated capabilities Moscow didn't believe Ukraine possessed, and it changed the strategic balance in the Black Sea in a single night. What happens next will depend on what Russia does in the coming days. If they retreat from Crimea's waters, tonight will be remembered as the beginning of the end of Russian naval presence in the Black Sea. If they attempt to reinforce and retaliate, Ukraine has already shown they are ready to strike again. They have shown they have the weapons, they have the intelligence, they have the will. And after tonight, they have proven they have the capability to destroy anything Russia puts in the water. And tonight, for the first time since this war began, the Russian Black Sea Fleet appears to be broken. Sevastopol harbor is burning, too damaged to ignore, too destroyed to spin. And when Russia's military bloggers go quiet, when their propagandists struggle to explain, when their admirals refuse to appear on camera, it means they are assessing damage they cannot hide. It means they are calculating losses they cannot replace. It means they are confronting a reality they never imagined possible. Because tonight, Russia learned something they should have learned months ago. Drones don't care about your naval tradition. Numbers don't care about your prestige. And Ukraine doesn't care about your red lines. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. The Black Sea Fleet is crippled. Ukraine's drone program has changed modern warfare, and the Black Sea is burning. And we will be here watching every detail as the next phase unfolds.